The twin suns of Kellara-9 had barely crested the horizon when Era noticed the silence. In the 3 months since she'd crash-landed on this backwater planet, the mornings had always been filled with the chittering of the local fauna and the rustling of the purple-leafed trees. But today, nothing. She set down her cup of synthesized coffee and reached for the plasma pistol she kept holstered at her hip. Old habits from the Terran-Zythian War died hard, even though the conflict had ended 2 years ago. Era had been a combat engineer in the 47th Fleet, fixing everything from starship engines to orbital defense platforms while under fire. Now she was just a veteran trying to get home through the narrow window of her makeshift shelter constructed from her ship's escape pod. She saw them. Dozens of figures stood in a loose circle around her dwelling, their reptilian skin covered in elaborate patterns of white and crimson paint. The Kalari, the local indigenous species she'd been carefully avoiding. Era's jaw tightened. She'd known they were there, had seen their villages from a distance, but she'd maintained her isolation deliberately. The last thing she needed was a first contact incident. The Galactic Council would have her head for interfering with a pre-space flight. Civilization. She checked her pistols charged full and stepped outside. The Kalari didn't move. They simply watched her with their large, amber eyes, their scaled heads tilted in what she'd learned to recognize as curiosity. Each one carried a spear tipped with sharpened stone, and the war paint suggested this wasn't a social call. "I don't want trouble," Era said in Standard, knowing they wouldn't understand, but hoping her tone would convey peace. She raised her hand slowly, pistol pointed skyward. The largest color, easily 7 feet tall, with deep green scales and a crest of bone ridges along his skull, stepped forward. He planted his spear in the ground and began to speak in their clicking, hissing language. Era caught nothing except the urgency in his voice. Then he gestured toward her ship. Era's eyes followed his motion to the battered frigate she'd been repairing for months. Yesterday, after countless failures, she'd finally gotten the main reactor online. The ship had hummed to life for the first time since the crash, its running lights blazing against the twilight sky. She'd shouted in triumph, danced around the cargo bay, and celebrated with the last of her whiskey rations. She'd also, apparently, put on quite a show for the locals. The Kalari leader gestured again, more emphatically. Another warrior stepped forward carrying something wrapped in woven leaves. When he unfolded it, Era's breath caught. It was a drawing, crude but unmistakable. Her ship, rendered in plant-based dyes on treated hide. But it wasn't alone. The image showed the frigate surrounded by stars, and beneath it other ships. Smaller vessels that looked disturbingly like Kalari designs. If the Kalari had spacecraft, beneath that, more drawings, explosions, fire, Kalari fleeing. Oh. Hell, Era muttered. The leader spoke again, and this time she heard something familiar in the pattern of his words. She'd spent months listening to their distant conversations, and her neural implant standard issue for all Terran military personnel had been passively building a translation matrix, destroyer. The implant offered as a translation for one of his words. Sky death. Ancient enemy. The pieces clicked together. The Kalari thought her ship was something else. Something they feared. And the war paint, the spears, the circle around her dwelling, this wasn't an attack. It was a plea for protection. Era lowered her weapon slowly. She pointed to herself, then to her ship, and shook her head firmly. She held up her hands in a gesture she hoped conveyed difference, separation. "Not them," she said. "Not your enemy." The leader's crest flattened confusion, she'd learned. Another Kalari, smaller and decorated with intricate blue patterns, rushed forward. This one carried a carved wooden object that looked ceremonial. Era was fairly certain it was female based on the voice pitch. Began speaking rapidly, gesturing between the ship and the sky. The neural implant worked overtime. Stars, falling, metal birds. Death from above. A chill ran down Era's spine. She'd accessed the galactic survey data before the crash. Kellara-9 had been classified as a low-tech civilization, pre-industrial, no significant threats. But clearly someone had been here before. Someone who'd left an impression violent enough to become legend. Rayan would have known what to do, she thought bitterly. Her former squad leader had always been better with the diplomatic side of things. But Rayan had fallen on Proxima Station, holding the line while civilians evacuated. Era had fixed the evacuation ship's engines under fire while Rayan and the others bought her time. She pushed the memory aside. The Kaleri were waiting. Era took a deep breath and made a decision that would probably get her court-martialed if she ever made it back to Terran space. She walked slowly to her ship, the Kaleri parting to let her pass. At the cargo bay controls, she initiated a diagnostic display purely holographic. No actual weapon systems activated. The Kaleri gasped collectively as blue light projected into the air, showing a schematic of her frigate. Era manipulated the controls, zooming out to show the ship's classification markers. She pulled up her military identification, letting them see her face alongside the Terran Federation insignia. Then she accessed the ship's historical database and took a gamble. She searched for any records of Kalara 9, any past contacts, anything that might explain their fear. What she found made her blood run cold. 40-7 years ago, a Zethian raiding party had attacked Kalara 9. The records were fragmentary salvage from a destroyed Zethian data core after the war, but the images were clear. Zethian ships descending on Kaleri settlements, plasma weapons cutting through primitive structures. The Zethians had been looking for rare minerals and hadn't cared about the indigenous population. Era's ship was a frigate-class vessel. The Zethian raiders had used frigate-class vessels. She understood now. To the Kaleri, her ship's activation must have seemed like the return of their nightmare. Generations had passed, but the memory remained, passed down through stories and warnings painted on ceremonial hides. Era closed the historical file and pulled up something else, combat footage from the Terran-Zethian War. She edited it carefully, showing only the parts where human forces defended alien worlds against Zethian aggression. She showed Terran ships destroying Zethian raiders. She showed humans helping refugees. The Kaleri watched in utter silence. When the footage ended, Era turned to face them. She pointed to the Zethian ships in the frozen image, then made a slashing gesture across her throat. She pointed to herself, then to the Terran insignia, then placed her hand over her heart. "Different," she said. "Protectors, not destroyers?" The leader stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he removed the war paint from his face with his clawed hand, smearing the crimson and white. Around him, the other Kaleri did the same. The paint, Era realized, hadn't been war paint at all. It had been mourning colors. The leader approached and placed his spear on the ground at her feet. He spoke, and this time the neural implant's translation was clear. "The Skyfire warrior is not our enemy. She is the enemy of our enemy." Over the following weeks, the relationship changed. The Kaleri brought food and helped Era repair her ship, their strong backs and clever hands proving surprisingly adept at following her instructions. In return, she fixed their tools, purified their water, and taught them basic metallurgy carefully, always mindful of the non-interference directives, but unable to simply take without giving. When her ship finally lifted off 3 months later, the Kaleri gathered to watch. Era had programmed a final message into the ship's external speakers, translated by her neural implant into their language. "The stars hold both darkness and light. Humanity stands with those who face the darkness. You are not alone." As Kalara 9 shrank in her viewport, Era thought of Rayan and the others who'd fallen defending the innocent. The war might be over, but its purpose endured. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone needed help. And human, stubborn, compassionate, impossibly resilient humans would be there. That was what HFY meant.